The sun goes down. The fire is the only light for 100 miles in any direction. And somewhere out in that darkness, something is moving. Not imagined, not exaggerated for a campfire story. Real. For almost the entire span of human existence, night wasn't just less convenient the way it is for us. It was the most dangerous part of every single day, every single time, for every human who ever lived before artificial light existed. And the fears that came with it weren't irrational. They were earned, generation after generation, by people who didn't survive the things hiding in the dark. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what kept our ancestors staring wide-eyed into the blackness beyond the firelight, and why some of those fears are still wired into your brain today, even if you've never spent a single night outside a locked door in your life. Let's start with the obvious one, because it's the one that shaped almost everything else about how ancient humans lived after sunset: predators. For most of human history, our ancestors were not the apex predator of their environment. That's an uncomfortable thing to sit with, considering how dominant humans are today. But it's true. Large cats, wolves, hyenas, and other nocturnal hunters were faster, stronger, and had far better night vision than any human ever has. Humans, by comparison, are almost blind in true darkness. Our eyes are built for daylight color vision, not night hunting, which means that for a huge portion of history, the moment the sun went down, humans went from being a capable, tool-using hunter during the day to one of the more vulnerable targets on the landscape. This is not a small detail. This is one of the most important survival pressures in all of human evolution. Entire social structures were shaped around this one fear. Groups didn't sleep in open areas. They didn't sleep without a fire. They didn't sleep without someone awake and watching, because the danger wasn't theoretical. It was a nightly, real, and immediate threat that could end in death before anyone even had time to react. And this fear didn't fade quietly into history. It's still inside you right now. Nyctophobia, the fear of darkness, isn't some strange modern anxiety disorder that appeared out of nowhere. Researchers studying childhood development have found that a fear of the dark appears in children across almost every culture on Earth, often peaking at ages when a child would historically have been most vulnerable if left alone. That's not a coincidence. That's an inherited alarm system, passed down from ancestors for whom that fear kept them alive long enough to have children of their own. But predators were only the beginning. The second major fear is one that's almost impossible for most modern people to fully imagine: the complete, total disappearance of visual information. Today, even in a dark room, there's almost always some source of light: a phone screen, a street light through a window, a glow from another room. True darkness, the kind where you cannot see your own hand in front of your face, is something most people alive today have rarely, if ever, experienced. But for ancient humans, especially in deep forests, caves, or moonless nights, this was simply what most nights actually looked like. When you remove all visual information from a human's environment, something strange and well documented happens to the brain. Without the ability to confirm what's actually around you, your mind begins filling in the blanks, and it does not fill them in with calm, reassuring images. This is why so many ancient myths, all across completely unconnected cultures, independently developed stories of night spirits, shadow creatures, and beings that only appear after dark. These weren't just superstitions invented for entertainment. Many anthropologists believe these myths were, in part, cultural tools, a way of externalizing and making sense of a very real, very universal psychological experience: the specific terror of not being able to see, paired with the certainty that something dangerous really could be out there. This leads directly into the third fear, and it's one that's easy to overlook because it's not about monsters or predators at all. It's about other humans. Ancient human groups didn't always trust each other, even within relatively close distances. Territorial disputes, resource competition, and conflict between rival groups were a real and constant part of life for much of human history. And night was, strategically, the ideal time for a raid. Reduced visibility, sleeping, less alert targets. This is one of the primary reasons ancient camps almost always maintained some form of watch through the night, not just for animals, but for other people. The fear of a night raid from a rival group wasn't paranoia. In many regions and periods, it was a documented, recurring, and often fatal reality. This is also part of why fire became so much more than a source of warmth. Fire was a defensive tool, a deterrent, and a signal, light that pushed back not just cold and predators, but the psychological weight of vulnerability itself. Some anthropologists argue that the control of fire may be one of the single most important developments in human history, precisely because of this. Not because it cooked food, although that mattered too, but because it gave humans, for the first time, some degree of control over the terror that came with darkness. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting, because the fourth fear isn't external at all. It's internal, the fear of illness and death itself, specifically at night. Across many ancient and pre-modern cultures, there's a recurring, well-documented belief that death and serious illness were somehow more closely tied to nighttime. Some researchers suggest this may have a very simple, practical origin. Illnesses that were manageable during the day, when a person could be tended to, fed, kept warm, and monitored, often worsened at night when temperatures dropped, when exhaustion set in, and when there was less ability to actively respond to a medical crisis in the dark. Fevers spike at night. Breathing difficulties intensify in cold air. It's entirely possible that ancient humans noticed over countless generations a real and repeated pattern. People got sicker and died more often during the night, and out of that repeated, painful observation, deep cultural fears around nighttime and death took root, fears that persist symbolically in language and storytelling to this day. So when you put all of these fears together, a clear picture starts to form. Ancient humans weren't afraid of the dark because of some irrational superstition. They were afraid because darkness genuinely represented a convergence of nearly every major threat to survival at once. Predators they couldn't see coming, disorientation that could get them lost or hurt, rival humans who might use the cover of night to attack, and the terrifying, repeated observation that sickness and death seemed to strike hardest exactly when the sun went down. And this is the part that should genuinely stick with you. Almost none of that pressure has disappeared from inside you, even though almost none of those specific dangers apply to your actual life anymore. You might live in a house with locked doors, working smoke detectors, streetlights outside your window, and a phone that can call for help in seconds. And yet, some deep, old part of your brain still tenses up at a completely dark room, still listens a little more carefully to a strange sound at 2 a.m., still feels, even for a split second, that same ancient unease the moment the lights go out. That's not irrational. That's not something wrong with you. That's tens of thousands of years of very real, very earned fear, encoded so deeply into the human nervous system that it has survived long after the actual dangers that created it have mostly disappeared. So the next time you find yourself a little uneasy walking through a dark house, or feeling that small flicker of unease switching off the last light before bed, understand what that feeling actually is. It's not a flaw, it's not silliness, it's an inheritance, a fear passed down in an unbroken chain from every single ancestor who managed to survive long enough, night after night, generation after generation, to eventually lead to you. If this gave you a new appreciation for just how much of your own mind is shaped by ancient survival, you're going to want to see the video where we cover exactly what ancient humans did the moment they heard something moving outside their camp at night, because the way they actually responded is far more calculated than most people assume. Subscribe if you want to keep uncovering the hidden psychology behind everyday human instincts, because the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. Almost nothing about the way you think and feel today happened by accident. I'll see you in the next one.